Three, two, one. Welcome to another episode of the Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast, also streamed on expertcresecrets.com, where we believe most high net worth individuals and those who help them, they struggle with clarifying their capital gains tax deferral options. Not having a clear plan is the enemy, and using a proven tax deferral strategy such as the Deferred Sales Trust is the best way for you to exit highly appreciated businesses, cryptocurrencies, save a failed 1031 exchange, so you can defer millions in tax and you can create and preserve more wealth or help your clients, friends, or family do the same. Hey, I'm your host, Brett Swarts. In each episode, I'm joined by some of the best real estate, financial, crypto, and business minds in the world where they share their ideas, deal stories, and inspiration. So together we can make complex tax deferral strategies simple and passive income plans achievable. Hey, I'm excited about our next guest. He is out of Chicagoland, and he is a real estate investor, entrepreneur, coach, and author. And he's also one of the Kwak brothers. And the Kwak brothers help individuals in real estate no matter what stage they are in their career, whether they're looking to get started in real estate investing or they are a seasoned real estate investor. They aim to provide value and solutions to you and so much more. Please welcome to the show with me, Sam Kwak. Hey, Sam, how you doing?
Hey, how's it going?
It's going well. Excited to have you on the show. And for our listeners getting to know you for the first time, would you give us a little bit more about your story and your current focus?
Yeah, so Brad, appreciate you having me on, and really excited to share some story, and also would like to get to know your audience as well. I hail originally. My story starts as an immigrant back in 1999. So my brother and I, we moved here along with our parents, and I was just 7 years old, and my brother was about 5 years old, right? And my parents originally immigrated here with the plan. So my dad's a church pastor and my mom's a music teacher. So they wanted to come here, start a church for the Korean immigrants here in Chicagoland. So I've been here, although like I think Texas is calling my name, and Florida too, with the no income tax there. But I basically grew up as an immigrant. You know, you got the language barrier, the cultural barrier, you got the challenge of not knowing the network, the people here. So grew up here all my life, and I can share a whole nother story about how we almost got deported and all the struggles of being an immigrant. But fast forward, it wasn't until I joined the military and came back and wanted to go to school, because that's what everyone does, right? Like, you're supposed to go to school. That's kind of like the push. And so I go to school, and halfway into my first semester, I just felt this calling to start a business. And it was interesting because like it was the first time in my life that I ever heard of the word entrepreneurship. Like prior to that, like I'm like, what's entrepreneurship, right? Like I thought the only pathway in life is to either you join the military and do a career there, or you go to college, get a great job, and hope for the best, right? Never crossed the mind that I can start my own business, or I thought, like starting a business, you have to be like old, white hair, like monocles and cane, right? And like that's the imagery I have in my head. Let alone real estate, man. Like it's a whole, like starting a business is one thing, but to get into like real estate, and I'm like, I'm no Donald Trump. Like there's no way like I'm gonna be able to get into this, right? So 2013, 2012 is when I decided to start a business, and then being in that world, I mean, I'm sure you know this, Brad, and some of the other business professionals, but like once you enter that business world, you realize there's all kinds of different, it's a whole different rule book, right? It's a whole different playbook that you play by versus some of the like ordinary people that they have a 9 to 5. And so that's when I actually got to discover this whole idea of investing in real estate, right? Buying apartment buildings, holding on to 100-unit apartment buildings, creating cash flow, building your wealth that way. That was a huge like eye opener for me. So 2014 is when my brother and I start investing in real estate. Still college kids. Still, the biggest challenge again is being we're 22 and 20 years old at the time. We didn't have any money. We didn't have any credit backing. No banks were ever going to lend to us. Our last name isn't Rockefellers and Carnegies. We don't get free ride. And then it wasn't until 2017 is we had a breakthrough year and everything kind of clicked together. And my brother went from having 0 rental units to having over 75 rental units in just 1 year. And I was 24 and Daniel was 22 at the time. And I remember showing up to closing And then the closing facilitator is like, you guys are the buyers? I'm like, yeah, we're the buyers. And they're like, where's your dad? I'm like, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean that? Like, no, we're the ones that we're buying the real estate. And like, how old are you guys? Like, oh, I'm 24. He's 22. I'm like, what? Right? Like, it's just like the closing agent's like confused. My attorney's like laughing and chuckling. It was a lot of fun, but that's kind of where it for us, like, that's how we got into real estate. And then ever since then, now we're doing some syndication, raising capital. I'm also involved. I happen to own a piece of a lending company now, doing a lot of different things. But along the way, my brother and I have discovered concepts and strategies to where now one of the things that we teach is we help homeowners and property owners pay off their mortgage faster in as early as 5 to 7 years. In fact, there's a little bit of trap with mortgages, which we can talk about. But that's that's kind of been a bit of a 30,000 feet journey of me and my life here in the United States, and all the way to where pretty much I'm right now. So yeah.
Amazing, Sam. Absolutely love it. I love the story. I love the perseverance. I love the humble beginnings, and I love that you guys did it at such a young age, and you're sharing your gifts and talents on YouTube and on your I think you guys have a podcast too, and everything else that you guys are doing, which is pretty epic. Before we go into the actual episode, which is avoid this mortgage interest trap, and talking about ways to accelerate and pay down debt of all kinds, by the way, whether it be single family homes or rental properties or whatnot, I want to take one other step back, Sam. I believe you all been given certain gifts in this life, and these gifts have been given to us to be a blessing and help to others. So I'm curious, I want you to go back to maybe your 15, 16-year-old days when you were younger. Yeah. What are those 1 or 2 gifts that you believe you were given, and how does that help, how you help and bless people today? And the second part of it is I want you to identify with your brother, because you guys run this thing together. So how do you guys' gifts complement one another?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I like doing all these types of personality assessments, and particular ones I like are DISC, Myers-Briggs, Cultural Index. I mean, there's a lot right there, right? The Enneagram. So like time and time again, the way that I'm wired based on these assessments is like I'm a high driver. Cultural Index says I'm a enterpriser. Myers-Briggs, I'm an ENTJ. So like all these personality types are like they either become generals, CEOs, some kind of executive. And so, but even in that, like, I think one of the gifts that I have is I can take a look at any business model and tell you like, if you're going to be profitable, or like what you need to do to be profitable. And so I just happen to land on real estate because I think, number one, like God's not making more real estate, at least what I know of. So real estate is the most valuable commodity in my experience. Even commodities like gold, silver, precious metal comes out of real estate, right? You got to have real estate to be able to mine precious metals, right? So that's just, kind of, I felt gravitated toward real estate for that reason. But yeah, I think that's been my biggest gift is administration, executive leadership, looking at a product or service and telling you, hey, does this have a market fit or not? So definitely my lead foot, I would say, when it comes to businesses is marketing for sure. I've done sales, which I think for all listeners, like sales is the key to success in any role. Doesn't matter if you're in a sales role or not. Sales has been a big thing. And a lot of people told me growing up, like, you're persuasive, right? you like sharing ideas, and like you can sell. So those are some of the gifts that I have. But Daniel, I think my brother complements my skill set really well. And he's got his own set of talents that he's really gifted at. And he's really good. I think he's great. He's a great leader, great influencer. He will make you feel like a rock star, right? Whereas like I don't naturally have that. Like for the longest time, I had a hard time deploying empathy. So like when it came to like emotional intelligence, like I'd be the first one to admit, like I was terrible at it, and I'm still working on it for the much of it. But Daniel is like way better. Like he's 1,000 miles ahead when it comes to that. So it's really cool because like I can see strategies, tasks, tactics, whereas Daniel can see the people and identify people's talents and lead people that way. So I think, yeah, it's been incredible and a blessing that we get to work together in that way. I know it's like hard to work with family members, especially your own siblings. So yeah, Daniel and I are incredibly blessed to be able to have that synergy and to work together.
Love it, Sam.
Sure.
It's amazing. By the way, you can learn more about Sam Kwak at thekwakbrothers.com. That's spelled Kwak brothers.com.
Yep.
That's the Kwak brothers.com. Amazing. So let's dive right into the wisdom now about how do
Yeah.
we do this? What's the number one secret, Sam, to avoiding the mortgage interest trap and or avoiding these never-ending interest payments from the banks?
Yeah. Yeah. So I got into this thing a while ago. You know, you and I both, like, we go to seminars and conferences and we just learn from a lot of people who are best. And one thing that I'm always curious about is how the banking system works, right? The United States and pretty much any country that has a central banking system, it follows a very similar pattern. But I got really fascinated with banks because by and large, banks have a lot of power, not just politically, financially, but they have a lot of power. And so I began studying, like, how does the bank make their money? Especially, you look at back in the 80s and like late 70s, interest rates were like 16%, right? Like you got a mortgage, you were paying a 16, 17% mortgage. CDs and savings rates were like 12%. And so compare that to like now these days where, yeah, the Fed just raised rates, but like still the interest rate's pretty low, like 3, 4, 5%. It's still lower than the 80s. So my question started with, like, how are the banks still making money? In fact, banks are actually making more money than ever before, I would argue, in the history of, the last 100 years. So when I start with the statement of like, hey, you should pay off your mortgage, a lot of people call me Dave Ramsey and all that. I'm like, no, not necessarily. Like, here's the argument that I get all the time is, well, Sam, like, why would you want to pay off your mortgage when, the interest rate's super low, inflation's at 7.5%. And a lot of this thinking comes from bond investing, is like during a high inflation environment, when you're locked in with a 10-year bond, like you're kind of out of luck because inflation kind of chews out all the yield that you're supposed to earn. So that's kind of the thought process from that. And the other argument I get all the time is with Sam, like, why not take any extra money that you're throwing in your mortgage and invest it into S&P 500, Dow Jones, where like the last year we got a nominal return of 8 to 12%. And all those are valid truth. Like there's definitely truth in that. But one thing that they miss all the time, because they come up with that argument based on technical readout, but not necessarily the social economic changes that we've experienced the last 40 years. And what I mean by that is, if you look at the social economic patterns, how often we move, and what are some of the, for those that are married, like what are the gender roles are like now? How does that ultimately translate to fiscal differences between 40 years ago and now? So for those that have been around for a while, you've lived through the 80s and maybe even the 90s, the days of you working for a company for 40 years and retiring and expecting the company to take care of you is long over. That's like 50s and 60s thinking, right? I think Goldman Sachs was one of the companies that kind of broke that. So now these days, I think there's an HR survey that was done a couple of years ago that the average person changes 7 careers in their lifetime, which is insane. Right? Long time ago, we used to do this thing where you stuck with that one career, you mastered it, you got really good at it. And then like, that was the pride and joy of your life. But now these days, especially like in 2022 and 2023, like the characteristics of success, I think now is how well you adapt and how well you change. And same thing with this fact that the U.S. Census Bureau says that the average U.S. adult moves 11.7 times in their lifetime. So if you extrapolate that data to where if you live to be about 80 years old, you would essentially move 7 to 8 times, or every 7 to 8 years, right? So here's the problem when it comes to your mortgage and how that all kind of fits together. If you were to look at mortgage lending, the mortgage lending industry almost 40, 50 years ago, you weren't really seeing a whole lot of people borrow on a 30-year amortization. It was often 5 years, 10 years, 15 at max, right? 15, people thought back in the day, 15 was a long time. So most people borrowed using 5-year amortization. They would do like 50% down, right? It was pretty characterized. It was characterized by a big down payment, short amortization, get it paid off as soon as possible. And then it wasn't until 70s and 80s when some of these savings and loans establishments now, which is Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, started to come up with securitizing mortgages and offering refinances, making the amortization longer. Now, some places in California, you got 40-year amortizations, which is like insane to me, right? But here's where I'm getting at. Okay, I just laid out all the ingredients to make a sandwich here. I'm gonna put the sandwich together. So if we were to explain this fact of the average person moves every 7 to 10 years or 7 to 8 years, I would say, and most people, like 90% of today's lenders, borrow on a 30-year amortization. If you look at a 30-year amortization chart, the vast majority of the interest that you pay happens where? The first 10 years. Right? We call it the front-loaded interest zone. And you don't have to believe me. Just go look at any mortgage calculation, and you'll notice that bulk of the interest you do pay happens in 10 years. Most people think it happens linearly, meaning they pay equal amount of interest every year, right? Which is not true. You actually pay a substantial amount of interest the first 5 to 10 years in any given mortgages. So try this, right? 7 to 10 years, you move. The first 10 years, you pay most of the interest. What is the combination of that? Well, what it looks like is if you live in it, you buy a house, you live in it, you've been paying most of the interest, and on the 7th year, you decide to list your home, sell it, get another house, get a brand new mortgage, a brand new 30-year mortgage. Guess what you just did? You made it to that critical point where you're almost out of the interest-heavy point on your mortgage, but now you just cycled all the way back to the beginning, where vast majority of your new interest, your mortgage payment is now yet again interest.
It's like playing Monopoly, right? And you just went all the way around, and you got Boardwalk and Park Place, and you're like sitting pretty good, and all of a sudden, you're like, oh, you go to jail and you lose your houses that you have on there.
Right. Except so most people, they buy a home, get a mortgage, sit on it for 7 years, make their payments, and really, they've been forking a lot of money over for the interest, and then they sell the home, get a new house, start all over. And they do this every 7 to 10 years. Now, if it isn't that, right, if you're lucky to be around the same place forever, what most people did in the last 2 years, especially when Fed dropped the rate down to 0, they went out and got a refinance loan. Now, if you look at the situation, most people have spent already 3 to 5 years in paying down your mortgage, and then 2020 came. We had a massive refi boom. But the trap there also is if you do decide to refinance into another 30-year mortgage, you're starting that process all over, back to square one, albeit that you have lower interest, rate and a smaller payment, but you just pushed back, you're in that first tenure of your mortgage amortization schedule all over again.
So if I'm hearing you, Sam, you're saying you got to understand what's actually costing you. So you define really what's happening here. Don't be allured by what you think inflation's going to do for you, or that your payment is just X, Y, or Z, right? And it's really, you got a heavy interest. So then what action do we actually take, right? So your mind shifts, changes. You're like, okay, Sam, you convinced me, right? So is there any hack to this thing besides just, no, you just need to pay it down faster? What's the next step?
Yeah. So, if 40 years ago, if you would have asked me, what should I do? I would have said, just throw some extra money in, right? Just throw tax returns, bonuses or whatever. The sad truth is that, yes, that works. But again, times have changed, right? 21st century is marked with uncertainty. We live in the most uncertain time in the planet. For crying out loud, we might have a World War III tomorrow. China can invade Taiwan, and then it's a mess, right? So we live in a time where it's super uncertain. Nobody knew that COVID-19 was going to be a thing. You never know, right? Recession just might be around the corner. There's even arguments for the dollar to be collapsed, or it may lose reserve currency status. There's a lot of possibilities here. So what you need is both the ability to be able to pay the sucker off, the mortgage off, but yet it still gives you flexibility, still giving you liquidity, and also the options that you need for this crazy time that we're living. So one of the things that we teach our clients, especially a lot of homeowners, and this is so true with, you might be 55, or 57 years old, and you're looking at your mortgage, and you still have 28 years left to go. But 65 is just around the corner, and they're freaking out. They're like, oh my gosh, I need to retire. My 401k looks like a 201k, and I have a 20 year left to go, and I still have $400,000 sitting in my balance. I need to get rid of this. So what we help them do is we use a different debt instrument, which is actually funny because This same method that we teach is exactly what your local banks are doing with the Federal Reserve, right? And what they do is they borrow, your local banks borrow money from the central banks or with other banks using a line of credit. Coca-Cola uses a line of credit. Pepsi uses like big companies, large corporations use and bank on line of credit. And what's beneficial about what's special about lines of credit is that it is revolving, meaning that you can pay back, borrow again. A credit card is a form of a line of credit. But what it allows you to do is you could lower the principal balance on the line of credit by dumping literally all your cash, your savings into the line of credit, therefore lowers the principal balance, but yet still gives you the flexibility to take the money out whenever you want to. But when you don't need that money, it's sitting there saving you money, and it's true fashion cash flow banking. So I practice this tactic myself. This is one of the reasons how I was able to pay off a bunch of my rental properties, and yet I still cash flow. A lot of our clients pay off their mortgage. In fact, we had one client that paid off her mortgage in 2.5 years, and she was done. And now she can dump all that money into.
So is this insurance, or is this an insurance product, or no?
No, it is. So it could be different types of line of credit. It could be a home equity line of credit, which is the most favorable one because the rates are lower. It's collateralized, right? You can use a personal line of credit. Some of our clients are using business lines of credit. It depends, right?
So let's get super practical. So like I have my house right here. We bought it for $380. It's worth like $700, something like that. Mm-hmm. We owe like $250 right now, right? We've been paying on the mortgage for about 6 years, right? And it's like 3%. So walk me through like what's step 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah. So typically what we do is we'll help our clients. So let's say you're the client. So we'll help the client establish a line of credit. And we have certain bank relationships that has the right type. And the banks themselves know like what we're trying to do. And so what we'll do is, this is something actually surprisingly a lot of people haven't heard about, is you can actually take your entire mortgage and convert it into a home equity line of credit. This is called a first lien position HELOC. Technically speaking, it does look like a refinance because you're taking your mortgage, paying it off, and then you're getting a first lien HELOC. So you mentioned you have a $250,000 balance. You would essentially start with a $250,000 line of credit balance. Your line of credit limit will be established by the loan to value of that of your value. So typically 80 to 90% loan to value. And then what you'll simply do from there is it's almost easy as taking your line of credit, almost treating it like a checking account, into where you're just dumping your income, your savings in there, get that sucker down low. But yet when it comes to expenses, emergency, rainy day, you take money out of the line of credit. But the expectancy is because it is a cash flow strategy. You have to have, there has to be a net. Obviously you can't be walking backwards with the strategy. So that's something that I do myself personally. Thousands of my clients do it.
What's the interest rate on the 250? Like what's the?
Well, that's the thing is that, and I know this is like, some people might hear this and this is like, they'll yell like blasphemy. So when it comes to strategy, 9 times out of 10, interest rate has almost no bearing at all with the result. And it's crazy because like people are like, well, that makes no sense at all. Well, if you actually take a look at, and we've done calculations and modeling for thousands of clients, we actually took a 3% interest rate mortgage and we used a 4.5% interest rate HELOC. The 4.5% interest rate won in terms of how much money it was saving and the amount of time that they were saving. Because the focus here is that because we're lowering this is all about principal and average daily balance reduction on the line of credit. It allows us to pay to not only save money and interest, but also save time. So what we focus on is not necessarily the rate. We focus on the effective interest amount.
So let me pause and make sure I get this. Because if you're saying this is like a checking account, because I imagine I have money over here in this bank account, money over this in this business bank account, this personal bank account, this other business bank account, maybe this other LLC. Then I have, of course, and then you have retirement. But are you potentially saying bring them all under this under one umbrella so that we could lower that overall daily balance?
Yeah, you have to be careful because, if you have LLCs and separate entities, you don't want to commingle. And I'm not a tax attorney, so, I'll leave that to you. But what some of our clients have done that do have businesses is they'll just pay themselves either through an owner draw, or there will be an actual like W-2 payroll, like they'll pay themselves on a W-2 because you don't want to mess around with that. So yeah, I mean, there is a smart way of doing this. I know I'm making it sound like you should just dump everything in there, but there is more of a balance.
If you've done it with 1,000 people, there's got to be some ROI to it, and it's got to be who's for. By the way, you can learn more about this by going to the kwakbrothers.com. That's the KWAK brothers.com. The KWAK brothers.com. Sam, we're literally up against the wire here, so I want to bring you on for a second show, and maybe on the second show, in a couple weeks. We'll literally break down a case study for everybody, so we can geek out on some of the numbers on an Excel spreadsheet, because this is very fascinating. I had not heard about it this way, but we're always open-minded here for creative ways to doing this. But that being said, are you ready for the lightning round?
Let's do it.
All right. Knowing what you know now, Sam, if you go back to your 21-year-old self when you're first buying that first property, or 22, what's the one golden nugget you make sure to tell yourself to do?
Yeah, hire a good team. Okay. And be careful who you partner with, because I've gotten in bed with the wrong people and it will screw you up big time. I mean, we didn't get hurt too much, but it definitely stunted our growth, where I think we could have skyrocketed with the right partners. But yeah, hire the right people, be patient with people, and go from there.
Perfect. Question number 2, what's the number one book you've recommended or gifted the most in the past year?
So the book that I absolutely loved, this is really one of the first books. I think this is foundational. It's The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. That was actually the first business book I read, and it completely changed my life.
Awesome. Question 3, what's your biggest frustration when it comes to the 1031 exchange, or the lack thereof options for people who want to exit crypto tax deferred?
Number one, if I was answering this honestly, the fact that government's trying to get rid of it, number one. Which bad do, right? Don't mess with this. Honestly, I think a lot of people just have a lot of misconception, especially with my own students that are like, man, I'm just going to 1031 this, I'm going to do this and this and that. But they just they don't understand the process, right? The time window to pick the next asset. And so I think more people just need to understand it instead of making it sound like it's more of a catchphrase, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Having knowledge of what it does, what it doesn't do, what the limitations are. By the way, if you are looking for ways to defer capital gains tax on the exit of cryptocurrency or business, or even save a failed 1031 exchange, you can go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. We have an amazing strategy called the Deferred Sales Trust, which is an alternative to a 1031 exchange. It's a backup plan. It works for crypto, businesses, primary homes, stock. Remember, the 1031 only works for investment real estate, whereas the Deferred Sales Trust works for all assets of any kind. You need to have $1 million net proceeds, $1 million gain is our minimum, but you can go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com to learn more about that. Next question on the lightning round, Mr. Sam. What are you most curious about right now?
Yeah, that's great. How to track. So it kind of goes back to the earlier thing, is how to attract the best talent possible, right? Yeah, because if you can attract the best people in the industry and whatever you're trying to do, the best marketer, the best HR, the best accountant, right? The best attorney, I truly believe that the world is your playground. So, yeah.
Perfect. Number one leadership quote or theme that you strive to live by?
Invest in people, and they'll invest in the clients.
Love that. Last question. After all your success, everything you're doing, you and your brother, and with your company's business and helping all the people create and preserve more wealth with strategies such as paying down the mortgage in a creative way, using you call them HELOCs, I think, right?
Yeah. So the term for the strategy is called accelerated banking.
Okay.
So we're accelerating the banking process, right? So
cool. So after all of that, how do you stay centered in your what the habits you do to stay centered in your values, and then stay encouraged to charge forward to reach new heights after all this rapid success at a young age?
Yeah, and I think this is true for anyone. Number one, I didn't design this. I didn't plan this when I was 20 years old. I didn't say, oh, we're gonna go start this and then buy these properties and then right. So you almost have to I believe in God. So whether you believe in universe, God, whoever, whatever you believe in, I believed in God and trusted like whatever's next, right? I didn't necessarily force my way into like the next thing. I just kind of like left my hand open and said, hey, like whatever's next thing I'm ready for. And then if there's any frustrations or challenges, that to me is an opportunity for me to grow and then break through that barrier so that I can glean from that experience and tackle whatever the next challenge and next level is. But I never forced, you ask anyone, I think you probably agree, even with your success, like you probably never even intentionally like design everything, right? I remember I recently listened to Jordan Peterson and Joe Rogan podcast, right? And when Jordan Peterson asked like, man, you're so successful. You're like, Joe Rogan, you're so successful. And Joe was like, I didn't plan this. Like, it just started out with having conversations, right? And that's exactly how I feel about the success looking back. So I didn't plan it. I just each day took time and figured out how can I help. So
I love it. And yeah, consider it pure joy, right? When you face trials of many kinds, like these are just opportunities to grow and to be faithful and to learn from these challenges that come up. Like instead of it happening to you, it's happening for you, right? Changing that mindset.
Oh yeah, 100%.
And looking at it as an opportunity, right? And don't take it for granted because we only have may only have one day to live, so you never know. So Sam, I want to thank you for being on the show. I want to encourage you to keep using the gifts and talents you've been given, which is being an entrepreneurial type of mindset, looking at business models and understanding how to be profitable, as well as persuasion and encouragement for all of the people that you serve. For our listeners who want to get in touch with you, would you remind them one last time what's the best place for them to find you?
Yeah, so it's simply the website, thekwakbrothers.com, or you can go to our YouTube channel, The Kwak Brothers, and you may or may not like what we say in there, but just a little heads up warning, but we pour our heart and soul creating content. So yeah.
Amazing. Thanks, Sam, for being on the show. And also want to thank our listeners for listening to the episode of the Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast, where we believe most high net worth individuals and those who help them, they struggle with clarifying their capital gains tax deferral options. Not having a clear plan is the enemy, and using a proven tax deferral strategy such as the Deferred Sales Trust is the best way for you to exit highly appreciated cryptocurrency, business, real estate, cryptocurrency, I said that already, NFTs, artwork, collectibles, really anything that has huge gain and you have a huge tax and you want to get a way to defer it and get some flexibility, some diversification, some liquidity. You can go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com to learn about that. It's capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. We also stream on Expert CRE Secrets as well, the YouTube channel, as well as Capital Gains Tax Solutions YouTube channel. Please rate, review, subscribe.